I am what I would call a recovering theater kid. I was introduced to musical theater at a very young age, and now as an adult, I see how there's a neighbor. I've been falling a little bit out of love with musical theater. Not totally, I'm just a lot pickier about what I like. So I really didn't have any intention of making this video, but then I went and saw the movie and I knew I just had to talk about the costumes because I absolutely fell in love with them. Wicked, in fact, was one of the musicals that actually inspired me to go to college for costume design. Did I do anything with that degree other than talk about costumes sometimes on the internet and make my own clothes? No, I did not. But it is a hobby and I do like to give my thoughts on these things. And Paul Tazwell, who was the costume designer for this movie, did such an incredible job. I just need to talk about it for a few minutes and then I can stop talking about it, okay? Now, before we fully get into this, art is subjective, so if you disagree with any of the things that I say, of course, the information I'm giving, some of it is backed with actual knowledge and information, things that I learned back in the day, but art is subjective. You can have a totally different opinion from me, and that is totally fine. That's what makes the world go round. As I said, the costume designer for this movie was Paul Tazwell. He is quite well known within theatrical circles. A lot of you guys will probably know that he did the costume design for Hamilton. He won a Tony. It was well deserved for that musical, and it showed that he was a very intelligent designer. And I think Wicked is just another, even in my opinion, better example of that. One of my favorite aspects of his design was how he did such a great job at creating more interest and contrast within a costume while sticking to very similar colors, and he achieved that mostly through texture and style lines. Both Elphaba and Glinda have pretty strict color schemes, but there is still so much interest in their costumes through things like details, texture, and style lines. We'll talk about details more in a second, but right now I'm going to pop up a few examples of where I really felt like he used different textures within a similar color scheme to really make the costumes pop when they might not have otherwise. I love the mix of time periods and how they are mixed together in this movie as well. Now, this is also partially, I think, inspired by the original play, and the costume designer for that, hold on, I have it in my notes, is Susan Hilferty, and she did an amazing job as well. But I really appreciate the way that Tazwell took those ideas and made them his own. The basic silhouettes, if you were just to black out everything but the silhouette, they're very similar to the time periods that they are inspired by. There's a lot of late Victorian, 1940s, early Edwardian, but the individual style lines is what really pushes this more into fantasy. I adore how unique some of these style lines are, especially on Glinda's costumes. I could look at those for hours and I don't think I could pick up on every little detail. You know it's good when you're mad that you never would have thought of it, and that's Glinda's costumes, in my opinion. I'm mad about how good these designs are. All of these time periods are very well known for their attention to detail, and he does a great job at mixing classic details that you would see that are historically accurate, but also understanding that this is a fantasy, so you don't have to stick to them. One of the best examples I can think of is, even in the tiniest of details, things like Elphaba's collars and Fiero's neckline on his blouses. What could just kind of be basic fantasy 101 costumes are really pushed to the edge and made completely unique by these small little style lines. Now, getting into a little bit more about the time periods, Glinda's is very obviously inspired by the 1940s and 1950s. These are time periods with incredibly dynamic silhouettes, but at the same time, there is a high emphasis on things like traditional femininity within the clothing, especially as you get more into the 1950s. But also at the same time, especially within America, these are some of the time periods with the strictest societal norms. So not only does the silhouette and style work for the individual character, it also shows some aspects of her personality. She's also willing to not rock the boat and stay within the lines in order to retain popularity and fame. On the other hand, Elphaba seems to be more inspired by the pre-Raphaelite era, specifically the time period of aesthetic and even more so artistic dress. Artistic dress is a countercultural art and fashion movement that either meant no corsets or very comfortable corsets and beautiful fabric with simple lines that was not super close to the body and allowed for a wide range of movement. This partially helps show that Elphaba does not want to stick to societal norms and really wants to go out on her own and believe her own things and does not accept society's views. Keeping these characters within these time periods is such a great way to use your audience's knowledge of the world before they come into the movie. Some of you may not have known the specifics of what I just talked about, but you would have known generally the silhouettes of these time periods and generally what was happening during these time periods. And I love when a costume designer utilizes what their audience knows to their own advantage. It's, again, an incredibly intelligent way to design. Now, I do want to again mention that both the stage play and the movie do this. I just tend to think that Tazwell utilizes it slightly better, especially for a film. Which brings me to my next point, which is that Tazwell did an absolutely incredible job translating the costumes to screen. As we all know, there are a ton of similarities between how to design for stage and how to design for film, but because they are two different medias, there are going to also be a ton of differences in how to design for either. And how things like musicals and books apply to the screen is always something you have to consider when designing for anything. And I think Tazwell did an incredible job at translating this to screen. One of those ways is something that I already mentioned earlier, which is attention to detail. When you are designing for the stage, you do understand that most people will not be able to see most of the details that you are going to put on your costumes. Therefore, costumes on stage tend to be a little bit simpler. And of course, Tazwell knew this because he used the opportunity of things like close-ups and having the audience very close to the screen to amp the details up to 1,000 and really allowed those details to shine. Tazwell even spoke in an interview, I think with Cosmopolitan, even like the heels of Nessa Rose's shoes emulate a tornado shape to kind of hint as to what happens later on. Just how much detail goes into every costume makes this whole movie a feast for the eyes. This is one of those movies that I know I'm going to watch many, many, many times just to pay attention to the details of the costumes. Once again, I'm not saying that I dislike the stage play costumes at all. In fact, I love them. I just love the movie costumes more. I also love that Tazwell was not just willing to stick to the script, because I know there's a lot of diehard fans and there's nothing wrong with that, but I like that he wasn't afraid to go off script and definitely do his own thing, because those are some of my favorite costumes, like Glinda's, the ballroom, what's it called? Oswald ballroom? I forget. Oswald. This dancing through life dress that she wears is absolutely gorgeous. She looks like a literal flower. I think it's a poppy because there's a lot of poppies within the plot of the musical and the movie anyway, and she does look like a literal flower without looking strange and without the silhouette looking weird. I also have to comment on the fact that I absolutely adore the Shiz costumes. Again, I feel like he took the basis of the play and just pushed it to like a 10. In the original, there is some playing with school uniforms and making them feel a little bit more fantasy, but he takes those silhouettes and those style lines and really makes them unique. Once again, lending towards the more fantasy feel and just making everything feel so magical. There's this one that Bowen Yang wears that I absolutely adore, which is a half pant, half skirt combo. Oh, I love that silhouette and that piece of clothing so much. Also, instead of having like a plaid, the pattern on the gray suiting material almost has like a bubble film vibe. I don't think it looks exactly like bubbles, but the coloring kind of gives off that Prismacolor feeling from a bubble. That's the most that I'm just guessing here, but that's what it felt like to me. Not just doing a straight up gray suiting material, he still used that opportunity to get like a little bit more detail and a little bit more fun. It'd be very easy just to make these look like fancy uniforms, and he didn't do that. He really thought this through. You can tell that Tazwell is an immense problem solver and really understands his craft to a degree that I really think every costume designer should. In recent years, this has become more of an emphasis for costume designers to not just understand things like design, but to understand how clothing is made, how fabrics lay, how things are supposed to be fit to the body. When I went to college, you not only learned how to design, you also learned how to sew and also pattern. I had to pattern for a few years. And I think he shows that he just has an immense amount of knowledge of this craft. It is so apparent in the design. One of the examples of problem solving was another interview that I saw. I didn't mean to watch this many interviews, it just kind of happened, where Paul Tazwell and Jonathan Bailey were on the news talking about the costumes. And Bailey talked about how he was constantly overheating in the Dancing Through Life costume. And so Paul Tazwell kind of configured like this cooling system within the costume. And that's so cool. Now, in the name of fairness, because I don't just want to be I'm not standing. Now, in the name of fairness, I don't just want to be sitting over here gushing about these costumes. So I am going to talk about like the couple of things that I wouldn't personally change. They don't bother me that much. They're just little tiny, like if I had my druthers, just in the name of fairness. But this is a costume review, so it feels only fair. Okay, there is one costume. I do really like how her costumes constantly have a hearkening to Bubbles. I appreciate that. But there is one that looks a little bit too 2008 for me, if you can get what I'm saying. I just didn't love the fabric choice, I believe, if I were to nail down what specifically I didn't like about this costume. I liked the cutouts. I don't think I loved the fabric. I think that might have been my issue. There is one costume that Elphaba wears. It is another one of those skirt pants combos, but I think it was the full front of the skirt and the pants, and the silhouette looked a little bit messy for me. I really wish they would have gone for the bow and yang skirt pant combo. I like that much more. Lastly, I don't love the coral teal combo all the time in the Shiz uniforms. I don't hate it. I just feel like sometimes it leans a little bit too 70s for me when nothing else in the show has that aesthetic. So it sometimes gets a little bit murky in my opinion. I like the teal and gray combo, and I wish it had just been like a little bit of coral, but there's sometimes where it's just a little too much for me, and I think it actually can take attention away from the main actors and the main characters. I like the cardigan. I want this cardigan where it's teal and coral and they're kind of like marbled almost together. I want that cardigan. I just don't think it works well within the world of the show. This is actually the one area that I will say I do actually like the stage play version of more, because it was white and a very, very dark blue or teal. That way, Glinda and Elphaba each have a color of that uniform that they can wear while still sticking to the colors of the uniforms. Whereas in the movie, you have Glinda wearing a lot of pink and you have Elphaba wearing black, which is not a color that is in the Shiz uniform colors. But saying that, overall, I absolutely adore the way that Tazwell designed this movie. It is, in my opinion, brilliant work overall. And I think future designers can learn a lot from the way he designs and the way he comes at costume design. It's very apparent that he has a natural eye for this, but he mixes with it a ton of knowledge of not only time periods and history, but also just a knowledge of how clothes work. Listen, I'm sorry that this was me just gushing about costumes for I don't even know how long I've been here, like almost 30 minutes. I just wanted to break down why I loved the costumes so much. I would highly recommend watching any of the interviews that Paul Tazwell has done on Wicked. I did not do him justice in the way that he thinks and the way that he is as a costume designer. I can't do him justice. You're gonna have to listen to him talk. Anyway, subscribe if you liked this video. Liking and commenting also helps. I hope you had a good time, and I hope to see you back here next time. Bye.